Oh, God. Oh, I didn't think about the Black Lives Matter movement. Oh. Oh, no.
From fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Pod Therapy, real people, real problems, and real therapists. You can submit your questions anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. On today's show, we discuss the psychology of panic buying as it relates to the coronavirus. In similar news, and sticking to their pattern of being decades behind the rest of the world, this week Iowa has its first confirmed case of SARS. Oh. And now, broadcasting from the churn, that guy is Dr. Jim Jobin. I'm Nick Tangeman. Time for some Pod Therapy.
Oh, he's still putting things up on the screen. It's terrifying. Oh, God, look at that. Oh.
So for those of you who aren't on Patreon, we've spent a big part of our Patreon section this morning looking at bumper stickers for
being cruel to Jim.
Oh, they're all so bad.
For preparing for Jim's defeat in March Madness if he loses.
I have to win this.
Yeah, and honestly,
I gotta stop looking. If I keep looking up there, I'm gonna break into. Oh my God.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. So Jacob's putting them up on the screen right now.
I gotta stop looking.
Yeah,
I gotta stop looking.
Here's the other thing that's interesting too is that the deal was that if you lose, you have to put on whatever bumper sticker is chosen.
No.
Okay, that's bad. That's really bad. No, it's not like you have to come in last place. You just have to not win. So that means the more of you that we can get to enter into our March Madness tournament, the more likely it is that Jim has to put one of these bumper stickers.
And what does somebody have to do to enter into this March Madness tournament?
As little as a buck.
Just little as a dollar on the old Patreon.
Yeah.
And they can find the Patreon where?
Patreon.com/therapy.
If I shut down the Patreon before this happens.
And I will reopen it.
Oh, God. Oh, he's got one up on the screen.
It's,
that's
pretty bad.
It's maybe the most
That's horrific.
It's maybe the worst thing I've ever seen. And if you're listening and you were on the Patreon, a few minutes ago, he put one up there that was breathtaking and so bad I couldn't read it. The new one that he put up there
is much worse.
I will get killed. There is no way.
Yeah. You'll get murdered with this on your car.
It will be minutes. The first trip, the first time I drive in any direction or have to get gas.
No, you know what? No,
I will be a dead man.
The mailman who delivers this to you.
Yeah,
will kill you.
Will kill me right.
We'll firebomb your house.
Yeah.
And he won't be wrong. His reaction is the right reaction. Unfortunate mistake, but right reaction.
Yeah.
And at my funeral, he's
we
going to say,
want that mailman doing that.
Yeah. And the judge, when the judge explains and he's listening to me tape record right now, he's going to be like, you know what? That's unfortunate, but I needed to do what I did.
Yeah.
You can't take a risk. That's not the right action. So, oh, God. All right. So, welcome to Pod Therapy. I need it right now.
This is a good good
bumper
Patreon.
sticker madness.
So yeah, we got that going on.
You can go to March Madness. Oh God, I can't even.
Patreon.com/therapy. As little as a buck, you can sign up, and then you can get into our March Madness tournament. Set up by Smitty Scoop.
Yes,
thank you very much,
Smitty,
for setting that up.
Yeah. Well, actually, no. Screw you, Smitty.
No, thank you, Smitty.
I wish nobody would have done this.
You know what?
You're doing the Lord's work.
You know what else is working against you?
Yeah.
Is
you can submit 3 brackets, I think, on the thing.
Oh, is that what it said?
Yeah, I think in the rules thingy it allows 3 brackets.
Oh, that's I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Oh, I immediately found that clause. I was like, how many can you do? And the system will take 3 per person.
No,
there should be a limit down.
Our friend, listener of the show, Leon Kassab,
yes,
who kicked our tails
and is also the official
in
lawyer
fantasy
of
football,
therapy, which I'm probably going to need here.
Has officially joined the March Madness bracket.
Oh, he's already gotten
so
in?
Now you got to go up against him too.
The guy who beat us in the last sports contest.
Yeah. So.
All right. Let's talk about something more pleasant.
Yes.
Let's talk about coronavirus.
Let's talk about coronavirus.
Let's talk about something uplifting that will bring me from the depths of my depravity.
Exactly.
What's this virus? This is a new thing that I haven't heard about.
Yeah, it's called coronavirus.
Yeah, I don't know if you've.
Yeah. It's the most popular thing on Earth right now.
You think they'd cover it on the news or something?
Yeah, you think so?
You think you'd hear?
Did you guys see the clip of Dr. Drew
talking about it?
Yeah.
No.
Oh man, he was fiery.
Oh, really? What
he
was his position?
I can't remember.
Well,
the
let me
TV
guess.
show.
Is he anti-coronavirus? Because you know what, I'm against it. That's my view.
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
I pegged you as for
No,
like,
you know what?
pro
Controversial,
coronavirus.
anti-COVID-19.
All right. Way to take a stand.
Yep, come at me.
No, he was really upset at the way that it's being portrayed in the media.
Okay.
I did see this.
The
Yes.
panicky.
And,
Okay.
He said that you should not listen to anyone in the media about this. Ironically, of course, coming from a doctor
guy in the
who's
media.
just in
Who's
the
in the
media.
media?
Yeah, good point.
But he said that they're doing a terrible job because it's basically he's like it's the flu. It's as harmful as the flu. More people have died from the flu.
Yeah.
And he said
Yeah,
that
that's-
overall, he says that if you have a compromised immune system, you should be concerned about this.
Yes.
You should be taking precautions.
If you're elderly or you have a compromised immune system, then
yes,
yeah.
then this should be taken very seriously. But he
Okay.
said for the rest of us, wash your hands,
Yeah.
just general hygiene.
It is.
We're going to be okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
by the numbers, it's worse than the flu.
Yes, it is a
So I
pandemic.
don't like that he's saying things like it's just the flu,
See, and that's the
because
the
it's
weird...
it definitely is more contagious than the flu,
Yes.
and it
Right.
definitely has a higher death rate than the flu.
Yep. So
those
that's
two
what's-
things mean that it's worse than the flu.
Well, this
Right.
feeds into the panic and hysteria, right? Because
Right.
like anything, I think that there's an overreaction, and then I think that there's this underreaction that forms in response to the overreaction. And both are not accurate reactions, right?
Right.
And so an accurate reaction, and again, I am in no way, shape, or form going to take a position of misportraying in any way that I have any kind of medical knowledge about this. Nope, I'm here to talk about anxiousness today and like how that affects people. So I will not speak about the epidemiology because I don't want to ever be wrong about something that is this.
Right.
It's important.
So
CDC, the WHO, those are not media organizations. Those are guardians of the public. Epidemiologists and highly trained scientists weighing in on this and giving us data on this. It is a very important thing. It does matter.
now this is something that's really interesting. So I got this article off of BBC.
Yeah.
And the article is about the psychology of panic buying,
Okay.
which is really kind of fascinating.
Like the masks and
So,
the
right,
sanitizer and the
so
gloves,
you've
which are
seen-
gone.
Toilet
You
paper.
can't find these at all.
Yeah.
Toilet paper, of all things.
Well, and
Toilet
they
paper and
actually
water.
talk about toilet paper in here.
Oh.
That's brought up because there was something happened, I guess, where it got out in the news that I think it started in Japan or China, where they said that we're not going to have toilet paper because we're not going to be able to import or export, or something to do with importing and
Oh,
exporting.
Made
okay.
from China.
Yeah,
I've been wondering
so-
where that was coming from.
Yeah, and then so that's how that took off.
Okay.
And then there's also this
And people
snowball
just see
effect.
people buying toilet paper and go like, "Oh, I must need to buy toilet paper."
Yeah.
Panic buying.
Yeah, so there's the snowball effect that
That's
takes
true.
into control there too. So
wow.
this article is really interesting. If you find it's on the BBC, written by
We'll link it.
Brian Lufkin.
We'll put it in the episode description to take a look at it.
Okay.
So now we got to react to that. We got to react to this ethos that's permeating our country, and definitely has just recently hit Nevada as of this recording. We have our cases in our northern Nevada counties and also now southern Nevada, and there's a lot of fear about it. I've reacted to it. So why don't we start with case study number one? We'll do Jim's reactions versus Nick's reactions. How about we'll start with that?
Oh, okay. This
So-
will be fun.
I reacted in multiple ways. Coronavirus has very much characterized the last month of my life. So lots of reactions I did. I had a big reaction to this where, I have kids and one of my kids does have a compromised immune system. And so that was a really big challenge. And my wife and I had to sit down and go, what do we do? I'm at
beating
work.
your children causes a compromised immune system.
I think so. I think that, I'm not going to do the math on it, but I think so.
Oh, weird.
Yeah. So I didn't know what to do.
Open
It's hard to say if it's the beating or the neglect.
Yeah, it's one or
the
the other. You haven't fed them anything but Cheerios for 3
Yeah.
years. So
Not Honey Nut.
yeah, no,
Plain.
yeah, plain cardboard Cheerios. Then my daughter's school put out a notice that said, "Hey, there is a case of flu in this particular classroom." Now, obviously, they're not saying it's coronavirus. And this is their normal operating procedure. When there is a flu, they let all the parents know, and parents can use that information however they like. We pulled our daughter out of school right then, like that. As soon as I got that notice,
For how long?
Pulled her out of school for a week.
Whoa.
Considered changing schools Considered putting her in a home daycare where there's only like 4 other kids.
This is more of a reaction than I would have even expected from Jim.
Not me.
No.
Me.
Nick's seen me in full throttle anxiety.
Full
throttle.
This is why we tend to work really well together, is because we find a happy medium, because you overreact.
Yeah.
And I underreact.
And Nick's stoicism, he would watch the building burn and say, well,
I would get marshmallows.
Yeah. So pulled my daughter out of school, immediately hired like a nanny, like to watch her during that week, started interviewing schools every night to try to find like a home daycare. My wife stayed home from work. 4.
Okay.
About to be 5.
Okay, so you pulled her out of like a preschool.
Yes.
Preschool or kindergarten?
Yeah. Not even kindergarten.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's daycare.
Okay.
Yeah. So a little bit lesser reaction than if your kid's in 8th grade and you just, now he's not going to graduate the class because you panicked, right?
I just realized I was reacting to this as though your kid was in normal school.
No. Other kid went to school.
Okay.
Younger kid who does have the compromised immune system too. And is,
but you do
her compromise is also respiratory in nature. So.
You do love him less though.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about
it's
that.
Also that. It's also that. Yeah. I have to deeply explore the affection I have for both my kids. Yeah. So big reaction. And, she has not gone to school for a week because of that. And we did interview other schools and considered all of our options. And I think that we've simmered down and, like, we know what we're going to do now. We're going to, take care of, our plan with her, how we're going to take care of it. But, yeah, big reactions. I also took a positive step that is not so frighteningly run away from things. One thing that happened in the news is there was no tests. There were no diagnostic tests. And then early on, there was one company that has a very specific algorithm that they use to develop a genetic test for diseases, and they have a patented measure to do this. They had the very first COVID-19 test, and they were the first ones to get it approved rapidly through the FDA and European Union.
Are they a publicly traded company?
I invested.
Did you?
Instantly.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw that they were working on it, I was like...
It's probably good.
Why not? Because I happened to have been divested from the stocks as they were crashing. And so I was like, oh, well, that was lucky. Like, I just happened to have been divested at the time. And so I was liquid, and I was like, well, maybe I'll jump into the Dow now. It's dropped 1,000 points. And the next day it drops another 1,000. I'm like, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should not get involved. And then I looked at this one company. It's called Co-Occurring Diagnostics. And, nobody had seen it yet. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's just go all in on this and see what happens. Like, I got nothing else going on. Like, and it's not like my fortune. Like, I don't even have a fortune. It's not my life savings. It's my fun gambling money that, like, I use for stocks just for funsies. And so I put it in there, and it shot up 120%. I was like, woohoo! And then it dropped. So now it's riding the roller coaster of coronavirus going up and down. So those are Jim's reactions. How did you react, Nick?
Guess.
You've done nothing, and then, like... Anytime Laura says, oh, I'm nervous, you should wash your hands, you're like, nope.
Just out licking doorknobs.
Doorknobs, and then you chide anybody. Seats. Yeah, chide anybody who has any fear, right? People cough and you scoot closer to them. Yeah.
I've changed nothing.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
Maybe Jacob's the happy middle. What have you done, Jacob? Washed your hands more?
I
Following CDC guidelines?
I have washed my hands more. I've definitely been washing my hands more. I think I've bought some household supplies. I think I bought some household supplies earlier than I would have otherwise.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and bought
reaction.
a new thing of paper towels.
Okay.
We
just
had
to make sure you're stocked.
We had like 2 rolls of paper towels left.
So you went and got your next
batch. I was like, I'll go ahead and order another roll of paper towels.
Wow.
Because I ordered them off of Amazon.
Also, speaking to this point, I also was a pre-rusher to the supply rush. I got to the Walmarts before everybody else did because I was an early panicker because I had that early tip where I was believing I had just discovered the guy who treated the first case, and it also that was all negative. Nothing came out of it, so it's okay to talk about it at this point. But yeah, and I was an early rusher, and I bought like HEPA 97 level hospital air filters for every room of the house, like personal fan setups that like purify the air and can strain at the virus level. Like surgical grade air filters. So I reacted big, guys. I reacted really big.
I bought an extra case of toilet paper.
Yeah.
Which it was time to buy toilet paper. So I bought a case of toilet paper, and I bought an extra case not because of preparing for anything, but because they were 50% off.
Okay.
Oh,
And so I spent the same amount of money that I normally spend on toilet paper,
You saved money.
but I bought twice as much.
Okay.
which is interesting because usually they'll gouge prices for stuff like that.
Which, yeah, in
Which is
Amazon's
illegal.
credit, they're doing a
Right.
good job of preventing that. So 17 minutes into the podcast, we've now shared a lot about COVID-19 reactions. Maybe we should talk about other people having panic and what they should do about that.
So actually, what this article talks about is it kind of gets into the psychology of how this actually happens.
Okay.
Right? Of like what people are thinking and how we act as a society when these outbreaks happen and whatnot. And so, basically, to summarize this, it kind of talks about a number of things that are kind of occurring simultaneously that contribute to this issue. Number one is the hype of the sensational reporting, right? So it's a huge story, and people want to report on it. That's sensationalism kind of wins.
Have you experienced, or do you believe that the reporting on it is sensational, is overly sensationalized?
I think it is.
Okay.
No, not in the. I think that they're holding themselves to a very high standard of only reporting data.
I have not experienced what I think of as overly sensationalized reporting, but
They
I
don't
don't. But I
inflate
also
the
don't watch.
facts.
I don't watch like.
There's
Like news
reporting
channels
and then
and
there's
things like that.
commentary. Commentary people can say whatever they want. I don't consider that part of what we're thinking
Right.
of as informational journalism.
Oh, I do.
But I think
Because
there's
it's
subtlety
presented
to
as
this.
such.
So like News 8, our local news channel,
Uh-huh.
they put up on Twitter like a coronavirus update, and they have created a graphic for this. And the graphic could best be characterized as medical Armageddon in picture form. And so
Oh,
I was
okay.
furious
Oh,
about
yeah, I
that
did see
because I was
that,
like,
yeah.
hey, that's not cool. Like, you are a
Right.
community news group. You should be telling us exactly the danger level. And to do these subtle little things that garner clicks,
Yeah.
that to me
That's
is
shitty.
not appropriate.
The graphics
That's
and all that.
sensationalism.
Right.
And they'll say, no, it's not. No, we're just reporting the facts. We're just telling you in a calm voice exactly what's happened and where the latest case is and what our SNHD people are. But, that I do think is sensational.
I do think, though, too, when you start talking about stuff like within healthcare, and it's kind of the same way in our field, too,
Yeah.
that when you're presenting information, there is a context in which you have to present it,
Right.
right? I mean, and I think sometimes we don't understand that concept. That doesn't the concepts or the context, the context behind it doesn't actually come through in the reporting.
Right.
And if anything, I think sometimes that happens. I would agree with the graphics as well, too. So essentially you've got all these people seeing this, and there's kind of that sense of that panic. And while they will report that the best thing for you to do in situations like this is basic hygiene, right? So that's what they've come out and said is the best thing. Make sure you're washing your hands.
Right.
But here's the other psychological thing that happens is that when you've got something that's big and scary and kind of unknown,
Right.
and the solution is something simple like make sure you're washing your hands,
Doesn't feel satisfying.
those two, exactly. So it actually helps
Yeah, okay.
it actually boosts anxiety
Right.
because you start feeling like I'm not doing enough
Right.
to actually prepare myself for this.
No, I can
That
see
doesn't seem like it's on the same level,
Right.
right?
You feel like you need to do something.
Exactly. So there
Acquire supplies.
All right.
there does then create
Supplies.
Supplies.
So there then creates this loss of control
Okay.
where I have no control over anything now. If that's the best I can do, then
I'm screwed.
I'm panicked, right?
Yeah.
So the buying of things and stocking up on things,
Is an action.
yeah, it actually helps to decrease somebody's anxiety because
Yes.
it gives them this sense of control.
That's a good
I'm
point.
doing something about this to prepare myself.
That's a
Did
really
you feel
good
better
point.
after buying those things, Jim?
Yes,
Okay.
I did. It was retail therapy. Did a really good job.
There's also this thing called loss aversion
Okay.
that comes into play too. Whereas losing $100 feels worse than winning $100,
Okay.
right?
So it's that.
So yeah, and so there's this kind of idea of, well, I would rather spend the money now and stock up on all this stuff and not need it than
Right.
need it
Oh,
and
yeah.
feel a sense of loss
to have missed out.
if I don't have it.
Yeah, to have missed out on the supplies. And I think that's also a human thing. Like,
Absolutely.
we grade our, and this is maybe in the article, I don't know, I haven't read it, but I would imagine one of the things that I think heightens panic among humans is the panic of other humans. And I think that is an evolutionary trait that works. If you're part of a tribe,
That's herd mentality.
it's herd mentality.
Yeah,
If the
that-
herd starts running, there's probably a reason,
Yes.
but go with it, right?
There-
Because there might be a wolf at the end of that
Safer
pack.
to go ahead and just run.
Just
And
go with them, yeah.
That was one of the things that they pointed out here too. This Stephen Taylor, who they talked about here,
It's actually Tyler. Steven Tyler.
He's in Aerosmith. He's very famous.
Yeah,
Very good.
that's okay. So his advice, Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, said, and I want to make sure.
I really wish we quoted Steven Tyler from Aerosmith on the show more often.
What did he say? What was his advice?
He said, "Dream on, dream until your dreams come true."
Yeah, I think that is what he said. Yeah, which if you think about it in this coronavirus, it's really good advice.
So meta.
Yeah. He is considered very meta.
His quote here is, if
You
everyone
should live it up while you're going down.
if everyone else on the Titanic is running for the lifeboats, you run too, regardless of whether or not the ship is sinking.
God.
Right. So it's kind of that herd mentality, like we said.
He's a very intelligent songwriter.
Yeah.
I don't think we give him enough credit for his psychology research.
He's also older than you think. He was actually on the Titanic.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. That's a
you know
statement
what, though?
from personal
I'm going to be honest. That's how old I thought he was. If I can be honest with you, that's almost where I pegged him. I had him 19.
You pegged him on the Titanic?
I pegged him once.
Wow. Why are we talking about that?
Down we go.
That should be the only thing that we talk about on this show.
There's another bumper sticker for you.
Why is that coming up now in episode 114?
I'm a vampire. A nautical one.
To summarize, this is a really good article. If you're interested in this way of thinking and the psychology behind buying things out of panic, check this out on the BBC. It's actually a really good article. We'll link to it in the description.
I saved the receipt on all of my supplies and my HEPA air filters and everything else that I did. So I feel like that was responsible.
Have you not unboxed these things? Is it possible to take things back?
I've unboxed one of them.
Okay.
When I quarantined myself, but again, this actually made sense. Here I am believing maybe I need to be quarantined to protect my family, and I was going to go to like a hotel, and I'm like, okay, I'll contain myself in the one of the rooms in my house. Nobody needs to go in that room, and then I put the viral surgical level air filter in that room in case I'm breathing out something bad.
Because you thought
I'm capturing it
in your mind. Doing these things was protecting the lives of your family.
Exactly.
Okay.
But this comes back to an area of panic that I often bump into. If there is a 1% chance that my taking no action in a situation, and I've been guilty of this, even the way I raise my kids, I've overreacted a lot, throughout their lives. I've taken them to hospitals when they didn't need to be and things like that. Because in the back of my head, I have this zero-sum mentality of if there is a 1% chance that this will hurt my kid or something bad will happen to my family because of my inaction, I will not take that. That 1% is way too big for me. Because what do I gain on the other side? Oh, I didn't have to be bothered. I'd rather be bothered. So like anytime I find myself in a situation that could influence my kids, like the 1% chance that this flu warning at my daughter's school was specifically coronavirus, and the 1% chance that therefore she might catch it, and the 1% chance that therefore she might be in danger, when it's actually nothing hurtful to kids.
I don't mind you taking the kid out of the preschool.
Yeah, I'll always.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
because it's preschool.
Yeah,
it's not.
If it was like senior year, and
she's not taking the SATs at the end of this.
Right,
I'm fine with that part. I don't even think that's an overreaction.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's a fine reaction.
I don't think he's done yet.
Oh.
All the other stuff.
No, we can move on to commercial. This week's TheraProducer sponsor.
All the other stuff seems like a bit of an overreaction.
No.
And I have a response. I have a response for if there's a 1% chance of danger, then I act on it because the other end of that is nothing.
Right.
I don't think the other end of that is nothing.
Okay.
The other end of that is passing the neuroses on to the kids.
That's
what
probably
I was
true.
Say.
I will get them therapy. I'll get a discount.
Okay.
I'll get a discount.
You win twice.
You win twice. Yeah, that's right.
You know what you're not getting a discount on, though? That life coaching.
Well, that's true. So I will not be taking them to Jacob the life coach because I can't afford them. But, there's some good discount therapists out there that'll be fine for the kids. Yeah. So it'll all work out.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss compulsive lying. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's TheraProducer sponsor is Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop. In the remastered version of Star Wars A New Hope, Han Solo meets Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker at the Tatooine bar and accepts the job to transport them to Alderaan. Shortly after, he is confronted by a bounty hunter who ends up getting shot and killed. Unlike the original version, in the remastered edition, Han encounters a new character when he returns to his ship hangar and has a testy interaction. He appears to step on the visitor's tail, despite bartering for his own life during the encounter. Who is this digitally added character in the remastered version of the movie? There's your trivia. sponsored by Nathan's Hot Dog.
Super easy.
You think you got it?
Yeah.
If you'd
I've
like
got
to
it.
join Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop and make the show possible, you can go to patreon.com/therapy. Patreon.com/therapy.
Pizza the Hut.
Good movie, by the way.
We're back. You're listening to Pod
Spaceballs.
Therapy.
Such a good movie.
Our next
Classic.
question is about compulsive lying.
Hey guys, long-time listener, first-time writer. I am a compulsive liar. I don't like saying it because whenever one admits to lying or being a liar, all other things they claim are immediately questionable. This makes it incredibly difficult for me to seek help. Let me clarify what I mean by compulsive liar. I do not wish to fall under your categories of self-diagnosis. They are a listener. But my behavior does fit the bill. When I was younger, the lying was much more extreme and often involved false or exaggerated stories of tumultuous incidents at home. For instance, I once told some friends at school that my father had torn up some stories I had written, kind of not true, so I grabbed a letter opener and stabbed his arm. Very not true. After one night of confrontation regarding a different lie and coming clean with my closest friends, I found that I had lost their trust and that I was now all alone. This shook me to my core, yet did not eliminate all of the lying. These days, it comes to me without even noticing. While I do not engage in anything extreme, I find myself embellishing stories or inserting untrue bits in order to elicit sympathy or attention. When I think about this behavior, I am flushed with embarrassment and shame. For the last 6 years, I've been in therapy for unrelated reasons, but have identified the source of this problem being due to a number of circumstances in my household. I was an only child to parents who constantly fought and focused more on work than on nurturing me. I was often watched by families with many children while my parents worked and never felt I had a stable family foundation. It seems prime for lashing out for any kind of acknowledgement. I am now in my 40s, and lying seems to be a habit that I cannot get rid of. There are a number of other things in my life that instigate this behavior. I have never had sex, and it's often too embarrassing to admit. So I find myself in a position when sex is being discussed to either have to leave the situation or lie. Or the fact that I work in a field in which it is difficult to explain the nuance to coworkers, and it's easier to say something untrue that might have the same result just because it's an easier means to an end. This tends to create a slippery slope for other lying in other instances in my life. Before you suggest it, no, I have not discussed this with my therapist. Yes, I am aware that that therapist is a professional and is trained to handle this as such. However, as I mentioned once, you tell somebody you're a liar, it changes the dynamic, and I've intentionally avoided that matter in order to feel or perceive less judgment and make better progress on the other items that we discuss together. It should be stated that when it comes to therapy, I have been successful in refraining from any kind of lying in order to better myself.
Oh, that's good.
That is an important caveat.
Yep.
Your thoughts on compulsive lying in general would be appreciated, or any tools to help me recognize this behavior before it occurs, or ways to address it as it happens. Sincerely, Anonymous.
The story reminds me of a friend of mine that I had in like 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Okay.
And this was back, like he was a compulsive liar, but he was terrible at it. And this was back when the Ninja Turtles were huge, right?
Okay.
And so he was saying like he was a black belt.
Oh, yeah.
He was a ninja black belt. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. So I was like, well, bring your belt. So he did. And it was a black like cloth belt.
Okay.
With a buckle.
Uh-huh.
And on the buckle, he had painted this like ninja logo thing on it.
Oh.
But the funny thing was that our moms must have shopped at the same store because I was wearing that same belt that day.
No.
And I was like, yeah, no. And then,
yeah.
And then he also said that he was on the Golden Gate Bridge at one point when a meteorite hit. And I was like,
oh, wow.
What? This is crazy.
I was thinking while you were reading that email, I wonder if this person is a good liar.
Yeah. If they have that much.
And that's the thing. Like, I
Or do
lost.
they get caught often or ever or whatever.
I lost touch with this friend. But like later on in life, I know like in high school and all that, like he kind of grew out of it. I didn't think it was because he was so bad at it. Like it wasn't providing him.
Like sometimes kids lie.
Yeah. This kid did a lot. But that's normal, I think. But yeah, I would assume he's probably good at it if he's, if it's kind of become a habit and people probably believe it. There's got to be some sort of payoff.
Yeah,
for
the writer in this
the
case.
behavior. Yeah, it's being reinforced. So
I would suggest that the fact that he's I don't know gender or that they are not lying to a therapist or to the therapist.
That's good.
That's it's very good. And B, that seems like a really good foundation on which to then present it to the therapist.
Yeah, and I understand what the writer's saying, where the writer's trying to say, like, hey, I went to the therapist for, like, a different reason that's valid, and so, like, I'm really trying to focus on that, and I don't want this other thing to in any way distract the therapist. And I appreciate the caveats, and I appreciate the writer also said, hey, but please understand, like, when I'm talking about compulsive lying, I'm not lying to the therapist, so please don't fear that. And I appreciate that. That's fine. So, but obviously you wrote into the show because you'd like, a therapist or two of them and a life coach to weigh in on, what we think about this. So to the writer, I think a couple of things. One, I think you're observing accurately where this behavior probably originates from. And so I've done a lot of work in schools before and worked with a lot of kids, and sometimes we'll see a case like this where there's a child who's sort of like, people often use the phrase pathologically lying, and you use the word compulsive, which I think is a better use of the phrase. And usually it's associated with self-esteem. Usually it's associated with not feeling visible, not feeling valuable, feeling the need to exaggerate or enhance stories. And then usually the person eventually develops a really good storytelling ability. And like that becomes the way they capture attention. That becomes the way they're talked about, is they tell something exaggerated and then it gets repeated to other people and then people come back to verify and now you matter. And I think the writer talked about that, in their own genesis, and realizing, like, even in their household, like, they didn't have siblings, they didn't have anybody else to interact with. So it's hard to be meaningful, to be valuable to other crowds of humans unless you can somehow stand out. And I think that that's where it originates. And now today, the writer recognizes, yeah, I do this now regarding a lot of things. Like, I'll just embellish random incidents of a story that don't need to be polished, or I'll add things that don't matter. But then the writer also says, like the sex thing, that the writer's touchy about that, hasn't had sex, is in their 40s, feels like they have to lie. And to me, I put that in a little bit of a different box because I think that, I understand where there's things about a person's life or the events that have happened or not happened in their life, which they may be self-conscious about. And I don't think that for me falls into the same box of compulsive lying.
I agree too.
Yeah,
I was thinking
you're not required to tell your
there's
coworkers
also
about
private
your sex
business.
life.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. That's not relevant to your coworkers'
lives.
Yeah. No, I agree with that too. I think that was kind of where I was going with it too. I think that's more like ego protection type thing, more than an out of control or compulsive behavior.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the work with the therapist, I mean, if that's something that you don't really want to disclose because you're concerned that it would affect the relationship with the therapist, then don't disclose it if you don't feel comfortable doing that. I keep thinking, though, that like if I was working with a client and they did disclose that, would it change my relationship with my client? And I don't think it would.
No.
For me,
Yeah.
I can't speak for every therapist.
Is there a timeline that would change your thought on that?
No, not really. Great. And not really, because I think I just automatically assume
that we're telling
like going into it. No, that everything, that people aren't lying necessarily, but we're always getting it through their lens.
Right.
So I expect I'm never going to know what reality is for this person. Of course,
yeah.
It's just
it's
I'm getting
anyway.
this perspective. And a distortion of the truth or lying is another condition of their perspective.
It's just their perspective.
So,
it's not a deposition. We don't need to know what really happened. We need to know how you perceived it.
Yeah, how did you internalize it?
Yeah.
What meaning did you give it? You know, how does it affect your life today? Like that's all where I'd go with it. So I don't think it would really impact my relationship with a client if they did that. But here's the thing. You're saying I have been successful in refraining from any kind of lying in order to better myself while in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this tells us something, right? This tells us that for whatever reason, when you're in therapy, you have control over it.
Yeah, yeah.
So something is working, right? So what is it about being in therapy in which, in that setting, you have complete control over it?
Yeah.
And you are able to turn that switch off.
I think I know what it is.
But in outside settings, you can't.
I think I have a guess.
Do you?
My hypothesis, again, the way that I characterize compulsive lying, if somebody just tells me, what do you think causes this? My guess, and it could be a lot of things, right? But I already shared it. I think my guess is usually this has to do with self-value, and it has to do with what you could say a call for attention, but it really just has to do with valuation. To feel valuable.
Right.
Now, what is the first thing a therapist wants to do with you is they want you to achieve unlimited positive regard.
Right.
And so as a general rule, anybody in the world at any given moment, if you ask them, does your therapist like you? If you say you aren't sure, or if you say no, fire your therapist because they are not doing a good job.
So you think they have a good therapist?
They have a good therapist, and that therapist is doing exactly what every therapist wants to do, which is accomplish the first task. And the first task is what we call a therapeutic rapport, and that requires a person to be able to say, this person is trying their best to get me. This person does not disapprove of me. I feel genuinely liked by this person. And that's not fake. I think as a discipline, we do genuinely like you. You know, we do want to work with you, and we're non-judgmental as a position. That's a perspective. So I would guess this patient in this case is aligned with their therapist, feels valued by their therapist, feels connected to, and because of that, has no need to embellish to earn the approval of their therapist. That they probably have from time to time, but over time realized it isn't necessary.
Yeah.
You don't need to add, the meteorite hit me on the Golden Gate Bridge to the story to get your therapist to be interested in it. You could just say, I was in San Francisco. And that's enough for the therapist to say, what was that like for you? And just be interested in you as a person.
And be genuine.
I think that connection probably takes away the need to feel like you have to.
I 100% agree with you.
Okay. Wow.
On that.
Let's end the show on that note. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you soon.
I 100% agree with you. But however, I also want to emphasize to the writer
that they're doing
that this isn't 100% the responsibility of the therapist. Like, you're not doing well staying honest in therapy sessions because the therapist has some kind of magical ability and they're doing something.
Well said. Good point.
It's a mixture of both the therapist being genuine, open, and honest, and how you tell your piece of it, your interactions, right? So this is actually a really good, consider this kind of like, I always look at therapy and like when we were doing our rehab, running the residential program, I always look at that as like preseason.
Okay.
To use kind of a sports analogy.
Yeah.
Like that's our practice field.
Right.
That's where we get to practice skills.
Yeah.
And if things don't go how they're supposed to go, we can blow the whistle and say, okay, let's stop.
Yeah.
It didn't work. Let's go back. Let's run it again. Let's do it. Let's practice this behavior this way. And until we're going to continue practicing it here in this environment until we get it right.
Yeah.
Because once we leave here, we go out in the real world, then now there's no blowing the whistle, stopping, going back and fixing it. Right. So this is a good way to kind of look at your therapy sessions in the sense that this is your ability to kind of practice some of these skills.
Yeah.
So whatever you're doing in therapy is working for you.
Yeah.
As far as being open and honest. So take a look at what maybe is going on with, as Jim said, what the therapist is doing to make you feel comfortable with that, but also look at how do you respond to what the therapist is saying.
Yeah.
What are some things that you do? What are some steps that you take that maybe feel uncomfortable, but you kind of force yourself to take these steps with your therapist?
Exactly.
What kind of risks do you take in those sessions? How does it work out for you? What are you learning from all that?
Right.
Because all of that stuff I feel like you can take and you can apply into your real life.
And when people go through this, especially as adults, that practicing with a therapist is often practicing being uncomfortable a little bit, or practicing being vulnerable, or practicing saying something unflattering about yourself. And a lot of times you do feel safer, right? Because it's a medical professional. You're talking to somebody who can handle this. But doing the same thing out in the wild is sometimes really intimidating. But, to the writer, Nick's right. You've practiced this with your therapist. Now, they're specifically trained to make sure you feel very comfortable doing that and, bringing that behavior out of you. But Nick's right. You're practicing it. It would be a really profound thing for you to identify some people or occasions that you can be a little bit more vulnerable and express your flaw, or say something not self-aggrandizing. Say something that is a confession of your truth. Doesn't have to be your deepest, darkest truths, but just little things, apologies or saying something about something negative that happened or whatever it is, that's non-flattering. And again, it's like emotional yoga. It's stretching a new emotion for yourself, being comfortable with not having the other person's attention. Or another thing that could be challenging for a compulsive liar is offering silence. Whenever you're feeling like you need to weigh in, or you're feeling like you have to bring the attention to yourself, or you feel like you have to add something to the story or one-up somebody or wwhatever it is you're about to do, offering silence and just receiving what they just said and just participating in the conversation by volleying it, but not bringing anything novel. Because that's, at the end of the day, a lot of times that's the lie. The lie is the need to somehow get it back to me, to somehow make me appear in this story or appear in your mind. And if you can lessen that urge to do that, dampen that down by offering silence or trying some other conversational technique that's different, you might find that emotional yoga stretches you in a new way.
Sure, and you can still be involved in discussions without bringing the attention back to something that you've done. Asking open-ended questions is a great way to do that. You're staying involved in the conversation. You are actively part of it, right? But you're not making a statement. You're wanting to learn more about the other person. Mm-hmm. So it's a skill, too.
Yeah. It's a great question, though.
Yeah, really good question. Keep us informed. Let us know how that goes.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will discuss Stockholm Syndrome. You're listening to Pod Therapy.
This week's other THERAPRODUCER sponsor is Dr. Ben Dom. In Star Wars A New Hope, Luke Skywalker builds a formative relationship with his Jedi Master and mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Over the course of his training with Obi-Wan, Luke learns and appears to accept the religious view of the Force. Luke grieves and overcomes the loss of his uncle and aunt. Luke trains with a lightsaber and becomes able to use the Force in lieu of eyesight, ultimately enabling him to enjoy the greatest military accomplishment of the rebellion.
True.
Finally, Luke bonds so powerfully with Obi-Wan that he weeps openly for his mentor throughout the third act of the movie. How long did Obi-Wan and Luke Skywalker spend together in real time? If you'd like the answer, you can jump onto patreon.com/therapy and you can comment on this episode with what you believe the answer to be. Again, that's patreon.com/therapy.
There's a lot there. Okay, well, we're back, and this is Pod Therapy, and our next question about Stockholm Syndrome. But what actually consists of, are you looking for,
how much time
screen time
did he
screen
spend?
time?
No. In that
their
universe. In their
universe.
universe.
Okay. So then, what is a day, right? Because a day is
You could calculate it to hours. So,
okay.
You can calculate it down to hours, but for how many things I listed that were achieved through that relationship and the emotional attachment that Luke has to this guy, how much time did they actually spend together?
Because screen time is 12 minutes.
Yeah.
To put it in perspective.
Even in their universe, it's not even probably a full day.
That's my point.
It's a trip, right?
I'm watching these movies with my kid, and that's why it's all Star Wars right now. And at the end of the movie, of the first one, there's an award ceremony, and him and Han are being rewarded. And his one comment as he is being rewarded by a princess, and he has joined a rebellion. What did I say? Awarded. His one comment is, I wish Ben could see this. I wish Ben could be here. His uncle and aunt who raised him are dead. Recently.
Was his uncle's name also dead?
His only
thought...
his
uncle was Lars.
Yeah. Oh. And his only thought is, I wish Ben Kenobi could be here to be a part of this. And he is weeping because he feels this way. How long did he spend with Ben Kenobi? That's something people need to think about. These are the hard-hitting questions that I want answers to.
But in that time, how many times did they do it?
It could have been a whirlwind romance.
It's not the amount of time. It's the quality.
It's the quality.
You know what? You guys are right. Hey, Pod Therapy, it's Zach. I was telling Dr. Jim a while ago what I wrote about in my psychology class last semester. For my final exam, I wrote about Stockholm Syndrome. Can you guys give me your thoughts on that? I talked about what Stockholm Syndrome was and talked about the famous case of Elizabeth Smart, and I was comparing Stockholm Syndrome to toxic relationships, and maybe some aspect of Stockholm Syndrome relates to why people stay in toxic relationships. What are your thoughts on why people stay in toxic relationships? Thanks.
Stockholm Syndrome is the stocking up of stuff in your home for coronavirus?
Yeah. Stocking your home. It's a syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is whenever you are captured by somebody and you form a bond to your captor and almost have a desire to please them and protect them and help them and ultimately have their approval. And so, Beauty and the Beast is a good example. The Beast captures Belle, and she is a hostage, but then there's this sense of allegiance to him and this sense of desire to see him grow as a person and help him.
Best example, Cadillac Man. Robin Williams and Tim Robbins.
Haven't seen it.
Gotta see Cadillac Man.
I haven't seen that either.
Or Cadillac Man, as portrayed by Jacob. I don't know. I've never seen this. But yeah, the central concept, Elizabeth Smart, child is abducted by these people, develops a relationship with them, ultimately isn't revealed and released for years and years and years, and a million times in her story, she walked past police officers and was with the captors in a restaurant and things like that. And at any time could have run away or screamed or caused hell, didn't do it. And they say, well, why did this child not do it? Well, Stockholm Syndrome, because they ultimately formed some kind of psychological alliance with exactly the person who is hurting them, who is exactly the dangerous person in their life. So what Zach's comparing that to is saying, well, do you think that there's some similarities in toxic relationships, that you form an allegiance and a loyalty to somebody who's actually really unhealthy for you and is ultimately kind of hurting you? What do you guys think about that?
That's another thing that's explored in the great film Cadillac.
I'm going to IMDb
What is this wonderful movie that I've never...
I'm going to IMDb this. I'm going to look this up.
It is a good movie.
Okay. Well, okay. Here's the thing. As far as this relating to domestic abuse.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of Stockholm Syndrome actually plays into that.
Well, okay. Go ahead.
Possibly.
Battered wife syndrome. Similar concept.
Sound kind of like
yes,
cousins.
but
they're cousins.
Here's the thing. I guess the whole syndrome thing, like that's kind of the issue that I have with the pathologizing it.
Okay.
Because to me, I kind of follow the Duluth model, which is like it's this power and control wheel that was created.
Okay.
That explains domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more about manipulation. And I guess that's kind of the thing. Like when I think of like the syndrome, Stockholm Syndrome, battered wife syndrome is whatever.
Right. Which are unofficial diagnoses.
Exactly. And it almost kind of sounds like it talks about something biological that happens in the brain that people just connect to this person.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well,
right?
that isn't true.
But
yeah.
Exactly. And I think a better explanation for it is this power and control wheel. So if you actually just do a Google search, power and control wheel, you'll find this.
Yeah, turn on safe search.
No, leave
safe search on.
Leave it off.
Safe search
on. But it basically breaks it down into there's 8 different spokes of this wheel. And it talks about how individuals can maintain power and control over certain situations to manipulate the other person and to be able to basically control that relationship. So it breaks it down into intimidation, emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing, denying, blaming, using children, economic abuse, male privilege, and coercion and threats. So it breaks it all down into these different areas. I guess the thing is it's much more behavior based and manipulation than it is I'm just captive by this person and something happens in my brain. It just kind of switches and I just start to like this person.
Okay. So I'll go in a different road. I think that I don't think we're going to find that we philosophically disagree. I think we're looking at it from different angles. Same problem though. So for me, I think that this is a phenomenon. I agree. You and I both don't like pathologizing things, so I don't want Stockholm Syndrome to be a new diagnosis. It's not how it is. I think what it does, though, it's observing a phenomenon of human behavior, in much the A Block observed a phenomenon of panic buying and reaction, right, and the herd mentality. It's not a pathology. It's just a way that you can see humans behave. And I do think that evolutionary psychology has rewarded humans for not fighting captors. Like if you are abducted by another tribe and they killed all the men in your tribe and now they took all the women for their brides and now you better assimilate pretty damn fast or your genetics will be wiped out because if you resist you will be killed. And so there is this compliance factor of human psychology which acquiesces and tries to assimilate into situations that they find dangerous. And so I do think that there is something about this that is ingrained. No, it's not a biological switch. I just think it's a phenomenon of human behavior. And so I do think there's some truth to assimilating and complying with somebody who is actually not helpful, harming you, or is otherwise threatening. And I do think there's some truth to that behavior in toxic relationships. The beef I kind of have with that wheel, and I think there's a lot of interesting observations about that wheel. I'm not categorically against it. I'm good with it. The problem is you and I believe in internal locus of control. When the patient's sitting on the couch, we want the patient to feel empowered to make their own decisions, and we don't want them to just feel like the victim of other people's choices and decisions. Don't put the keys to your happiness in somebody else's pocket.
Sure.
Yeah. So the wheel, I think, is problematic because in my personal experience, when I'm working with somebody like who we might say has battered wife syndrome or somebody that is married to an abuser, and we're working together on figuring out what they're going to do, obviously I don't take the position of you need to divorce them, you need to run away, you need to do what Jim thinks is right. We have a safety plan, right? And we have basic understanding of what we're going to do. but then I allow them to go through their own exploration process to kind of disentangle the Stockholm Syndrome thing, for them to eventually realize, why do you want to be with this person? What are the strange emotional loyalties that you have to that person? Why do you feel the need to protect them from their own consequences? Why do you protect them and enable them? And that's not me showing them a power wheel and saying, look, you're married to a master Sith Lord who has come up with 8 psychologically tested ways to abuse you.
Okay, but that's
it's too empowering.
But that is kind of...
I couldn't do that wheel.
Okay, hold on. But,
and I have advanced degrees in this. I can't do that.
But
it's too hard. It adds too much power.
But that's not a fair description of this wheel either.
The wheel, I think it's a non-useful technique. It's just a tool. That's all it is. It's an observational tool. But I think it's non-useful to the patient. It's like diagnosing narcissistic personality disorder. It just ends a conversation as an open one. So whenever you're telling the abused, hey, listen, your abuser does these 8 things in this order to keep you under control. How is that empowering you? Let's explore your reasons for staying here.
Yes, I get it, but that's not the entire part of this wheel, though, either. I think that's kind of a mischaracterization of what this is and how it can be used.
Are you saying I'm being manipulative?
Yeah, a little bit.
Maybe you should shut up. Did I just intimidate you?
No, I think this is useful. I think this is...
When was the last time you intimidated anybody?
I'm not good at that part.
Yeah.
I think this is useful not just for people, the victim, to look at. This is useful for the helper. This is useful for the therapist.
I think it's useful for the
because
helper,
here's the thing that often gets missed is when we focus just on Stockholm Syndrome or battered wife syndrome, we lose practicality. Okay?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about it as if, yes, there's this biological need that they need to continue to, or that they need to assimilate to their captors, and getting them to understand that and break through that piece may help them leave. What the power and control wheel does is it talks about practicality.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as a helper tool.
But as a practicality, if someone's in that relationship, it's not as simple as, oh, now I understand I don't need this person, I can go.
Yeah.
There is legitimate power and control that's happening.
Yes.
If there's, I have a full-time job, you don't. I can afford a better attorney than you.
Yes.
I can take the kids
and having
from you.
the language to categorize what you're experiencing, which I think the wheel does provide, I think it is useful. And that's useful for educational purposes. I think the mistake, of course, and you're not saying that you should use the wheel this way, but the mistake could be disempowering the patient and saying, look, this is the 7 techniques that a cult leader uses, and therefore they're using against you. It over-empowers the oppressor into this mythical figure who has Sith Lord abilities.
Well, yeah, but I don't see... I think you're identifying a problem that I don't think anybody actually does. I don't think there are people out in our field that are doing that. I think I don't. I think the majority of the people working in that specific discipline, it's all about empowerment.
It's all about the other day.
Let me finish. Hold on. It's all about empowering the woman to gain back power and control in the relationship.
Isn't always a woman.
It's not. Well, yes. Okay.
But yeah,
you got
the
me.
oppressed are not
the person
to empower the oppressed. That's fine.
Okay. So, but this isn't just throwing this out there as you described it and saying, "Oh, you're right. You don't have any power. They've got all the power."
Right.
It is a tool to actually gain back power.
I think it is.
Sometimes that's just true, right?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes
it's
just
accurate.
the other person has all the power and you don't have any power.
Yes. And I think the wheel is useful, again, as a vocabulary exercise to teach you, like, hey, these are maybe the things that are happening around you that you're not able to detect. You just feel powerless. So, and one by one, they're like, oh, yeah, that does happen. Oh, that's what that's called. That's a bad thing.
So my question then, and this is, I'm a life coach. I don't know anything about this.
Yeah.
So my question is, by identifying that, because I understand what you're saying, that you want to keep dialogue and you want to keep the work moving, and by putting that out there, it can just end the work.
Yeah. So
that's your concern, right?
And this goes back to the same concept of like why use a diagnosis when a diagnosis is helpful. I want to continue a conversation. I want to end it. So if the wheel is misused, the thing that I fear, which I think I would trust Nick to use that wheel as an educational device and ultimately guide the person to growth. My fear is people will sometimes use it to say, you're being abused. Here's how you're being abused. These are the amazing chess master manipulation levels of your abuser. and they have godlike powers, and look at how you're being victimized. That doesn't empower the patient.
I can't
to say,
imagine someone
"How can I
saying
grow?"
they have godlike powers.
I'm mischaracterizing.
Yeah,
it. Yeah. Like I'm making a joke of it, but I do see this, and there are therapists that I just was attending a conference the other day where they were talking about the need in your patient work to help the patient overthrow the patriarchy, and like needing to teach the patient about patriarchal oppression, male oppression as a concept in society, and the need to not only identify that in every problem the patient's facing, but to specifically take them through these 5 steps of realization and overthrow. And that's, to me, very problematic. That's imposing a value structure. It's de-empowering the client, and it's giving them this thing that they have to fight against that's supposed to be this big conspiracy theory of danger. And
But
again,
now,
this could become that too.
Putting the patriarchy aside, because that's
Down
a whole,
with the patriarchy.
that's a whole different bag of bees.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's just true, though.
Yes.
That someone is being oppressed by someone else.
And I'm not denying that.
Mentally, physically, however.
That's where the wheel's helpful, because it's like, look at these techniques that might be happening to you.
Okay, so
that's cool.
So, like, identifying a problem
Yes.
seems like a good place to start.
As long as it's starting a conversation
Great,
and
okay.
it's leading to empowerment. But if it says, these are the bars your prison is made out of, that's interesting if you could teach me how to get out of the prison, right?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't just tell me how big the executioner's axe is. Like, tell me how I can get out of this, right? And so that's what's important, and I think that there's something to be said about this toxic observation that Zach makes that I think is empowering to the client to say, because sometimes they feel so bewildered by their own place in this, and they're telling, and that's a lot of times I hear this as the therapist, they're like, I can't tell my family and friends about what I'm going through because they're all just going to yell at me and tell me to leave. But I can't explain to them why I can't do that. And I'm hoping you, the therapist, will understand why. And I do, because in my mind, I'm understanding there is this deep emotional allegiance to this person who's actually hurting you, and you're not crazy. You're not dumb. You're going through something complicated, and by appreciating that with them, we can slowly allow them the airspace to figure this out.
You might be dumb, but it doesn't have anything to do with this.
Yeah. Patient could be dumb for other reasons.
Those are separate issues.
Unrelated things.
I mean, I think, yes, I think I think we're both correct about our perspective in a certain
I think
way.
so, too.
Yeah.
I think it's application and use of both of these.
Yeah,
because,
I'm not against the wheel.
Because, I mean, the thing that's very beneficial about the wheel is not just for the relationship that they're currently in,
Right.
but the majority, I'd say 90% of the time that I've used this in sessions is with women who've had a history of being in abusive relationships
Yeah.
and don't recognize the signs.
Yeah, that's fair.
That
That's fair.
go into it and they don't
Teaching them for the
realize,
next one.
like, just really, really simple stuff, like, just basic things.
Or
of,
like isolation.
They
Like,
always make the same.
Yeah.
Whenever we make a decision, it's always this person that makes the decision. We'll discuss it, but ultimately it
Yeah,
always
or my new
goes this way.
boyfriend doesn't want me to talk to my friends anymore and wants me to delete my Facebook page and
Right.
all these other isolation behaviors that if you have the wheel, you're like, hey, listen, that's a red flag.
Right.
Like, challenge that now, or at least walk forward with that mentality.
Or
of
we
awareness.
combine finances and one person controls it.
Right.
And that's
and
it.
that's fair. I think it's
And, like,
educational.
The- it- again, like, the thing I like about it is the practicality, because it addresses the actual things that are currently obstacles to getting out of that situation.
Yep. I think that that's a great question. So, Zach, I think that you're onto something. I think that there's some truth to it. And if anybody who's listening to this feels that they are in a toxic relationship and can't get out of it, and you feel confused by those emotions, I don't think you're wrong to be confused by those emotions. It's okay. You're not crazy. But I think that if you do look up this wheel, you'll see things that seem very familiar to you. And I would hope that you use that as a ladder to think carefully about how you might go through some change process to realize what you authentically want. You know, I want you to be motivated by your best life, not by fear.
Another really great use for the wheel is you use it to get someone to admit that they are indeed a witch.
Yes, yeah.
You put
the
them
wheel,
on the wheel and
yes,
it stretches them.
It stretches in every direction.
Yeah, yeah.
And then if they survive, they are clearly a witch.
Right.
And if they died, then
They're
died
probably
innocent.
a witch, too.
They're in heaven with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Right.
Right.
Got to
Couple
find
of-
them witches, people.
Got to find those witches. Couple of announcements here at the end of the show. If you would like to join our March Madness bracket, you can go
Which
to...
you do.
You probably do. Patreon.com/therapy. We've already posted the link. I'm sure we will again on Selection Sunday. Smitty Soup has created a bracket for us to submit to, and so you can join that. Selection Sunday is March 15th, so that's whenever we'll all pick our brackets. Pod Therapy Flat Stanley's coming. More on that in the future. But be prepared. And new logo, you can vote on it at patreon.com/therapy relatively soon whenever you hear this episode air. So be looking for that on Patreon. And if you're not a Patreon yet, but you would like a say in our future logo, patreon.com/therapy. As low as $1, you can jump in and play with us. A couple of announcements as far as new Patreons. Want to welcome our new THERAPALs, Taylor Ash, or Ashy. I can't know how to spell it.
I believe that's Ash.
Ash. Taylor Ash and Kevin Anderson. Fun fact, Kevin Anderson 100% only joined our Patreon to submit brackets for March Madness.
The only reason I'm here.
I cannot stress this enough, people. If you are not in the Patreon,
now is the time.
You want to get into the Patreon.
This is your chance.
And this is from the guy that wants this podcast to fail.
So
he's actively trying to get it to fail.
If you know nothing about college basketball, that does not matter.
Just throw names on the paper.
If my saying that last sentence is the first indication to you that what we're talking about is related in some way to college basketball, fine. Get in there, get a bracket together. It's easy. You don't need to know anything about it to put that bracket together. Winner gets to put a bumper sticker on Jim's car.
Of any type, as long as it is street legal.
Street legal.
New Pterodactyls. Welcome Mason Miller. And Kate Keller, who jumped up. She's at the very top of the acceptable pterodactyl grouping. She is very close to just becoming a de facto THERAPRODUCER.
Which we had.
Yeah, and that's actually somebody else got bumped too. But thank you, Kate Keller. And also Kate is working on our Flat Stanley and is the creator of Pod Therapy Comic and is pretty much our favorite person. So thank you, Kate.
And we especially want to thank our bosses, the Elite Eight, mysterious and shrouded Illuminati members of our fan club, the THERAPRODUCERs. Thank you, Smitty Scoop, Jake Schneider.
Chairman of the board.
New chairman. No, last week I think he was. Robert Brownie Jr.
Vice chairman of the board, and he tried to take the seat away from Jake this week.
No, did he?
Increased his bid by $10. He just barely missed Jake, so he's nipping on Jake's heels. But I will not reveal numbers.
It's like I'm watching an episode of Succession.
Yeah.
Just hostile takeovers.
He wants his seat back, and he's so close.
Thank you, Kayla Lansbury, David Data Scoop, Violon, Judy Schneider, Nathan's Hot Dog Scoop, Dr. Ben Dawn, and ex officio board members Dan Martin, Elio Dare, and Crazy Manana Scoop.
Crazy Banana Scoop joined us as well.
But she wanted to be head of the Pterodactyls.
She's trying the same crap Dan Martin did back in the day. But she's at like 1999.
It's 2020 if she wants to be a pterodactyl.
And also that pterodactyl thing that Kate created us just apparently brought in a bunch of people because they just like that artwork. So
it is. That's
love you,
beautiful
Kate.
artwork.
You're wonderful. If you'd like to hear this episode uncut and unedited and enjoy our spontaneous side projects, you can go to patreon.com/therapy. And thank you for supporting mental health. That's all the time that we got for this week's session. We want to thank our landlords, the Ice Cream Social Podcast, and thanks to those of you who contributed to our show today. We really appreciate it. Remember, pod therapy isn't something you should keep all to yourself. Share this episode with somebody who needs it by opening this episode's description in your podcast app and copying and pasting the link provided into your social media. Don't forget, you can find us at facebook.com/podtherapy, on Twitter @PodTherapyGuys, and at patreon.com/therapy.
If you want to submit a question to the show, ask anonymously at podtherapy.net or email us at podtherapyguys@gmail.com. I'm Nick Tangeman.
Jim the Hutt.
Thanks, and we'll see you for your appointment next week.
So, do you guys want to take guesses on how long Ben Kenobi was hanging out with Luke Skywalker before?
I'm going to say a day. Well, it depends on how long they had to hyper jump to get to Alderaan. So
I think less than a day.